Hello, greetings from Sunday, the last Sunday I can ever edit this book in a meaningful way. So, the way that book publishing works is that you get to a point where the book is copy edited, which means the copy editor has seen it, who is the person who deals with, missing commas and wrongly capitalized words and so on. And then you enter in the copy editor's corrections, and then it gets laid out into a book, which is called First Pass. And then it gets proofread to look for bad breaks, look for these things called widows and orphans, where like one line appears on a page, but no other lines, things like that. And there are some little edits in First Pass, typos, bad breaks, little stuff. But you don't want to edit anything big or important in First Pass because it affects all the line breaks and it affects the length of the book. And, it's just so this is the last moment when I can make like substantive changes. Today is the last day I can make substantive changes to the, book, uh, which is stressful. It's exciting in a way, but it's stressful. So I just wanted to read the first two chapters and make sure that I'm good with them. Now is not the time to tell me what you don't want me to write or what I'm making a mistake about, unless it's like literally a mistake. Because this is pretty much done. Oh, I'm so nervous. So I just wanted to read a little bit. Oh man, it's robot-y again. What are you talking? How can it be robot-y? I just fixed it. Just yesterday, I had this amazing members only stream where everything sounded so good. It's sold out in Canada on Amazon. Is it really? Amazon. Oh, audio's okay for me. All right, great. Whew, that's a relief. At least it's okay for some people. My beard is getting gray. This book has turned me gray, y'all. Um, so I'm sorry that the book is sold out in Canada on Amazon. Is that true? Like the signed edition, I assume, is sold out. Let me see. Everything is tuberculosis on Amazon, signed edition. What about the signed edition? Oh, it looks like it is sold out. Well, that sucks. I signed as many as I could, y'all. There's still some available on Amazon.com, I think. Let me check that. Like if you're in the US, there should still be some, right? Yeah. That one can still be pre-ordered. I don't know if they ship to Canada in that case, but sorry, I'm signing as many as I can. But I can't sign the whole first printing. It's too big. Yeah. Okay. It's not winter in Indianapolis, but it's pretty cold, and we don't turn on the heat until we really have to. All right, I'm going to read. Everything is Tuberculosis, The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection by John Green. That is the title. I'm not changing it now. Dedication. This book is dedicated to Shreya Tripathi, Henry Ryder, and TB fighters everywhere. That includes you guys. So share in that. But I named Shreya and Henry. Okay. Around the turn of the night, this is the introduction. It's called Gregory and Stokes. Around the turn of the 19th century, the Scottish tinkerer and chemist James Watt began working on a new project. He had already achieved fame and success for making steam engines more efficient, helping to fuel the Industrial Revolution that would history. The steam engine would lead to everything from air conditioning to air travel to AirPods, while also unleashing over 1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, reshaping the planet's climate. Watt's innovation carried within it so much power that we named a measurement of power after him. Watt also made other important contributions to the human collection of tools and knowledge, inventing a machine that could copy sculptures and developing new strategies for manufacturing chlorine to bleach textiles. Am I absolutely sure that I don't want to include in a footnote that before that we mostly bleached textiles with human urine? Am I sure of that? What's the first footnote? Yeah, I don't want to distract from the flow of this, even though that's an amazing fact to me. Also, do I want to introduce a new fact? No. Um, I don't think I want to introduce a new fact that might be wrong that the fact checker hasn't fact checked. It's too late in the game, Green. Just keep moving. Just let that be some not 501 people here who got to enjoy that fact, and that's enough. Okay. But Watt hoped the new project would be his most important yet. He became obsessed. Watt hoped that this new project would be his most important yet, or Watt hoped this new project would be his most important yet. There's no need for the that. But Watt hoped this most important yet. He became obsessed with finding some kind of chemical solution to treat the lung disease known to physicians as phthisis. Watt's daughter, Jessie, had died of phthisis at the age of 15 in 1794, and now his son, Gregory, was ill with the disease, suffering from the classic symptoms of persistent cough, night sweats, fever, and the physical wasting of the body that gave the disease its colloquial name, consumption. Gregory was in his early 20s, a skilled orator known for being phenomenally attractive. One friend described him as literally the most beautiful youth I ever saw. In a furious attempt to save Gregory, Watt helped invent a device that delivered nitrous oxide to the lungs, believing that shifting the amount of oxygen available to the body might help it heal. But the treatment proved unsuccessful. After many years of suffering, Gregory died of consumption in 1804 at the age of 27. By 1900, phthisis had come to be known by a new name, tuberculosis. My great uncle Stokes Goodrich was born that year in rural Tennessee. He was raised in a wood frame house built by my great grandfather Charles, a country doctor who rode his horse night and day around Franklin County delivering babies and dispensing medicine. Stokes was a sickly child. In those days, and in these ones too, I suppose, it was common to connect illness to some kind of deficiency, failure, or past mistake. A physician might include, as one German doctor did, that a woman's life threatening illness was brought on by a dog which barked loudly at her. For baby Stokes, being given coffee and sweets by a family friend was thought to be the inciting incident. Thereafter, Stokes developed the worst case of typhoid fever I ever saw recover, my great grandfather later reported in a short memoir he wrote for our family. In 1918, when Stokes was 16, no, sweetie, when he was 18. Jesus Christ, Green. Jesus Christ. Sorry, positive self talk only. Let me check my great uncle's. Stokes Goodrich, 29. Died May 19th, 1930, meaning that he was born in 1900. I'm looking at my own great uncle's. I'm looking at my own great uncle's obituary right now. He died at the age of 29 in May 19th, 1930. Ergo, he was born in 1900 and had not yet turned 30 when he died in May. Okay. All right. For baby Stokes, being given coffee and sweets by a family friend was thought to be the inciting incident. Thereafter, Stokes developed the worst case of typhoid fever I ever saw recover, my great grandfather later reported in a short memoir he wrote for our family. In 1918, when Stokes was 18, he again nearly died during the great influenza pandemic when he became ill while working at a munitions factory. He survived and in 1920 went to work for Alabama Power and Light, laboring as a lineman. As the 1920s progressed, Stokes experienced frequent bouts of what he hoped might be bronchitis. But the stubborn cough would not go away, and eventually, after coughing up blood, he sought medical attention. Here is how my great grandfather reported what happened next. Stokes went to see a fine doctor in Gadsden, Alabama, who x rayed him and discovered tuberculosis in the apex of his right lung. The x ray technician who made the film told me, Dr. Goodrich, your son has miliary tuberculosis, and I have never seen a case that lived over 2 months. Stokes was placed in a sanatorium in Asheville, North Carolina, one of many American cities that functioned as a tuberculosis colony of sorts. Stokes had the best care in the sanatorium, but steadily grew worse, and on May 18th, 1930, passed over the river to his Lord. My great uncle was 29 years old. I often wonder what it must have been like for my great grandfather, having trained as a doctor, to be unable to save his own son from disease. We are powerful enough to light the world at night, to artificially refrigerate food, to leave Earth's atmosphere and orbit it from outer space, but we cannot save those we love from suffering. This is the story of human history as I understand it, the story of an organism that can do so much, but cannot do what it most wants. Now we are 2 centuries removed from the death of Jesse and Gregory Watts, and nearly a century removed from the death of my great uncle Stokes, and still over 1 million people died of tuberculosis in 2024. That year, in fact, I'm going to say 20, yeah. That year, in fact, more people died of TB than died of malaria, homicide, and war combined. Just in the last 2 centuries, tuberculosis has caused over 1 billion human deaths. One estimate from Frank Ryan's Tuberculosis, The Greatest Story Never Told, maintains that TB has killed around 1 in 7 people who've ever lived. COVID 19 displaced tuberculosis as the world's deadliest infection from 2020 to 2022. But in 2023, TB regained the status it has held for most of what we know of human history. Killing 1.25 million people, TB once again became our deadliest infection. What's different now from 1804 or 1904 is that tuberculosis is curable and has been since the mid 1950s. We know how to live in a world without tuberculosis, but we choose not to live in that world. In 2000, the Ugandan physician Dr. Peter Mugeni gave a speech about the rich world's refusal to expand access to drugs treating HIV/AIDS. Millions of people were dying each year of AIDS, even though safe and effective antiretroviral therapy could have saved most of their lives. Where are the drugs? The drugs are where the disease is not, Dr. Mugeni said. And where is the disease? The disease is where the drugs are not. And so it is with TB. This year, thousands of doctors will attend to millions of TB patients. And just as my great grandfather could not save his son, these physicians will be unable to save their patients because the cure is where the disease is not, and the disease is where the cure is not. This is a book about that cure, why we didn't find it until the and why in the decades since discovering the cure, we've allowed over 150 million people to die of tuberculosis. I started writing about TB because I wanted to understand how an illness could quietly shape so much of human history. But along the way, I learned that TB is both a form and expression of injustice. And I learned that how we imagine illness shapes our societies and our priorities. James Watt understood consumption as a mechanical failure by the lungs to ingest the proper ratio of gases. My great-grandfather understood his son's sickliness to have been driven by ingesting coffee and sweets in childhood. Others would understand TB as an inherited disease that affected certain types of personalities. Still others would argue the disease was caused by demon possession or poisoned air or God's judgment or whiskey. And each of these ways of understanding tuberculosis shaped not just how people lived and died of TB, but also who lived and died of it. Today, we understand tuberculosis as an infection caused by bacteria. TB is airborne. It spreads from person to person through small particles contained in coughs, sneezes, or exhalations. And anyone can get tuberculosis. In fact, between 1/3 and 1/4 of all humans have been infected with it. Should I make that? Is that not clear that I'm talking about living humans? Like, does that sound like all humans who ever lived? I mean, 1/3 and 1/4 of all living humans have been infected with it. And should it be between 1/4 and 1/3? Since that's like bad. I think it should be between 1/4 and 1/3 of all living humans have been infected with it. Anyone can get tuberculosis. In fact, between 1/4 and 1/3 of all living humans have been infected with it. In most people, the infection will lie dormant for a lifetime, but up to 10% of the infected will eventually become sick, a phenomenon we call active TB. People are especially likely to develop active TB if they have a weakened immune system due to other health problems like diabetes, HIV infection, or malnutrition. In fact, of the 10 million people who became sick with TB in 2023, over 5 million also experienced malnutrition. And because the disease spreads especially well in crowded living and working conditions like slums and poorly ventilated factories, tuberculosis has come to be seen as a disease of poverty, an illness that walks the trails of injustice and inequity that we blazed for it. The world we share is a product of all the worlds we used to share. For me, at least, the history and present of tuberculosis reveal the folly and brilliance and cruelty and compassion of humans. My wife, Sarah, often jokes that in my mind, everything is about tuberculosis, and tuberculosis is about everything. She's right. All right, that's the introduction. I thought the book was already in printing. How is he editing it? Great question, Haley. Great question, Haley. It doesn't go to It doesn't go to the printer. It's like it doesn't go to the printer for some time. It goes into first pass tomorrow. So first pass is where, so I'm going to be like doing this with every chapter in the book over the course of the next like 24 hours. I mean, I've done it a bunch of times, but I'm doing it for the last time right now. And first pass is when it's laid out into a book instead of just being a manuscript. And you see the pagination and you see where the breaks are and you see how like individual words might get split in a way that you don't like. And so you like might take out a word to bring that word up. Like you want to make the layout of the book work. But in terms of the content of the book, that ends tomorrow. So, yeah. In terms of when it will actually be printed, I think mostly in January. The deadline for me signing is January 5th, so I assume that they can't print any books. They can print like the cover and stuff, but they can't print any copies of the books until January 5th. Oh, Aaron just became a Wimbly Wombly co-owner. Thank you, Aaron. IK is going to ask a library in Paris to pre-order. I don't know if that's a library in Paris, Texas, or Paris, France, but either way, I'm grateful. I mean, I've been finished with the book for many months. It's just like I'm making these little edits, like you heard me do. Yeah. Oh, they can print it, not just bind it, as said by Julie. Thank you, Sam. That's right. They will print it before that, and then they will bind it after. So I assume maybe they will start printing it in December, late December, maybe the week between Christmas and New Year's. But yeah. Okay. How much more do I have to sign, Celeste? I'm gonna, if I do my job today and I sign 2,000, I'm gonna be near 40,000. So, but next week is a shit show, not to curse. So Monday I have a bunch of meetings about a secret project that I'm very excited about that I really hope happens, but I can't talk about. Tuesday I have a Vlogbrothers video to make that I think I'm going to make in the format. I'm just feeling the format right now. I just feel like it's a format moment. I don't know why. And then Wednesday, I have a bunch of meetings again. I'm doing an exciting new project with Men in Blazers, the soccer podcast, and so I'm going to be doing that. And I got to make a Dear Hank and John episode. So next week is going to be very hard to. Next week is going to be very hard to sign, at least Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then Thanksgiving Day is going to be hard to sign because my family probably rightly expects me to hang out. And I got to cook and clean and everything. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I figure I can do 2,000 a day. So that puts me into like, it puts me potentially at like 46,000 at the end of November. I was really hoping to be at 50,000 at the end of November, because then I really only have December to do the remaining 50,000. So that's going to be pretty intense, but I don't know. I can only do as many as I can do. So I'll do as many as I can today. EM Clears just became a Womble enthusiast. Thank you. Okay. There are like, what are we cooking for Thanksgiving this year? Mostly sides. We love a side. I love stuffing. Green beans, mashed potatoes, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to do most of the cooking, but I'll do a lot of the prep cooking, like I'll do the like peeling of the mashed potatoes and so on. My Vlogbrothers video is not going to be half an hour long. It's not going to be an attempt to understand the entire information sphere going back to 1450. It's just going to be a regular video because my brother is way too ambitious. Will the secret project reset the days since Hank started a new thing? No, it's not a Hank thing. This is just it's a John and Rosianna thing. So Rosianna is my longtime producing partner, and we've got 2 fires in the oven. Was that what you say? No. Dishes in the oven, and one or both of them might happen. And the next week decides whether one of them happens. So it's exciting, but also nervous making. Irons in the fire. That's right. Not dishes in the oven. Irons in the fire. Fingers in the pies. Tongs in the fire. Irons in the oven. We've got all of it. All right. I got to read one more chapter and then I'm going to go because I got to go. I'm going to go eat lunch with my son. All right. But I think that, I mean, that sounded fine. I don't know. That sounded as good as it's going to sound. All right. Chapter 1, Lakka. When I first visited Lakka Government Hospital a few years back, I did not really want to be there. Sarah and I were in Sierra Leone, a nation of nearly 9 million people in West Africa, to learn about the country's maternal and neonatal healthcare systems. At the time, Sierra Leone had the highest maternal mortality rate in the world, with around 1 in 17 women dying in pregnancy or childbirth, and we'd travel there to learn about learn about and share stories of people affected by the crisis. There is a footnote that says, thanks to investments from Sierra Leone's, I think the food's here, Henry. Thanks to investments from Sierra Leone's Ministry of Health in deep partnership with other organizations, maternal mortality in Sierra Leone dropped by more than, I can say, more than 60% in the 5 years following our trip, a reminder that there is nothing permanent or unalterable about health inequities. Um, I don't want to ruin my video on Tuesday, but actually in Kono, the district where PIH is working and where the Maternal Center of Excellence is being built, maternal mortality since 2019 has dropped by almost 80%. Um, it has been reduced from 1,500 maternal deaths for every 100,000 live births to around 300, which is incredible. Now, still a very long way to go. 300 is way too high, but an 80% drop in 5 years, even before the Maternal Center of Excellence opens, just because there's more community health workers, nurses, better trained nurses. There's 3 OBGYNs working in Kono instead of just one, like there was when we started. It's incredible. It's like one of the things that this community should be proudest of. And our trip was supposed to be oriented around the global maternal mortality crisis, not tuberculosis, and by our last day in Sierra Leone, I was exhausted and ill. I possess a somewhat fragile constitution when it comes to health and also when it comes to most other things. But a doctor we were traveling with asked us to visit Lakka with him. He assured us that Lakka, a facility supported by the global health nonprofit Partners in Health, was basically on the way to the airport, and he needed to consult with the staff about a few cases. At the time, I knew almost nothing about TB. To me, it was a disease of history, something that killed depressive 19th century poets, not present tense humans. But as a friend once told me, nothing is so privileged as thinking history belongs to the past. When we arrived at Lakka, we were immediately greeted by a child who introduced himself as Henry. That's my son's name, I told him, and he smiled. Most Sierra Leoneans are multilingual, but Henry spoke particularly good English, especially for a kid his age, which made it possible for us to have a conversation that could go beyond my few halting phrases of Creole. I asked him how he was doing, and he said, I am happy, sir. I am encouraged. He loved that word. Who wouldn't? Encouraged. Like courage is something we rouse ourselves and others into. My son Henry was 9 then, and this Henry looked about the same age, a small boy with spindly legs and a big, goofy smile. He wore shorts and an oversized rugby shirt that reached nearly to his knees. Henry took hold of my t-shirt and began walking me around the hospital. He showed me the lab where a technician was looking through a microscope. Henry looked into the microscope and then asked me to. As the lab tech, a young woman from Freetown explained that this sample contained tuberculosis, even though the patient had been treated for several months with standard therapy. The lab tech began to tell me about this standard therapy, but Henry was pulling on my shirt again. He walked me through the wards, a complex of poorly ventilated buildings that contained hospital rooms with barred windows, thin mattresses, and no toilets. There was no electricity in the wards and no consistent running water. To me, the rooms resembled prison cells. Before it was a TB hospital, Lakka was a leprosy isolation facility, and it felt like one. Inside each room, 1 or 2 patients lay on cots, generally on their side or back. A few sat on the edges of their beds, leaning forward. All these men, the women were in a separate ward, were thin. Some were so emaciated that their skin seemed wrapped tightly around bone. As we walked down a hallway between buildings, Henry and I watched a young man drink some water from a plastic bottle and then promptly vomit a mix of bile and blood. I instinctively turned away, but Henry continued to stare at the man. I figured Henry was someone's kid, a doctor maybe, or a nurse, or one of the cooking or cleaning staff. Everyone seemed to know him, and everyone stopped their work to say hello and rub his head or squeeze his hand. I was immediately charmed by Henry of my son, the same paradoxical mixture of shyness and enthusiastic desire for connection. Henry eventually brought me back to the group of doctors and nurses who were meeting in a small room near the entrance of the hospital, and then one of the nurses lovingly and laughingly shooed him away. "Who is that kid?" I asked. "Henry," answered a nurse. "The sweetest boy. He's one of the patients we're worried about," said a physician who went by Dr. Michael. "He's a patient?" I asked. "Yeah. He's such a cute little kid," I said. "I hope he's going to be okay." Dr. Michael told me that Henry wasn't a little kid. He was 16. He was only so small because he'd grown up malnourished, and then the TB had further emaciated his body. "He seems to be doing okay," I said. "Lots of energy. He walked me all around the hospital." "This is because the antibiotics are working," Dr. Michael explained. "But we know they're not working well enough. We are almost certain they will fail, and that is a big problem." He shrugged, tight-lipped. There was a lot I didn't understand. I saw Henry again as we were getting ready to leave. He was standing near the entrance to the hospital. I asked him if I could take his picture. He said yes, and I photographed him a few times. We scrolled through the pictures together. I tried to communicate that I was smiling from behind my mask. Henry wore no mask. His bacterial load was low enough that he posed no infection risk to others. As we chatted, I realized I was looking at him differently than I had when I believed him to be the son of a staff member. He no longer reminded me of my 9-year-old son. Now he was an emaciated young man. When he looked up at me, I saw yellow clouds in the whites of his eyes, a byproduct of the liver toxicity that frequently accompanies the treatment he was on. I noticed swelling on one side of his neck, which I would later learn is a telltale sign that TB has infected the lymph nodes. I asked him if he took his medicine every day. "Yes," he said, "I swallow them. Also, they inject shot." "Is that scary?" His eyes got bigger as he nodded. Henry told me the injections burned like a fire under the skin and that the medication had many side effects, but the worst one was hunger. Active tuberculosis severely suppresses appetite, causing stomach aches and generally inhibiting the ability to eat. And once treatment commences and the infection begins to lessen, hunger roars back, which is a good sign, but only if one has enough to eat. Years later, a young TB survivor told me about the hunger. I was at Lakka again, sitting in the immense shade of a mature mango tree, one of the only pleasant spots on the hospital grounds, which otherwise comprised patches of red clay and overgrown shrubbery. 3 long, rough-hewn benches were moved throughout the day to keep in the mango's shade. On the bench opposite me sat the young woman, we'll call her Marie, hunched forward, knees on elbows. Marie was so thin when she arrived at the hospital that she'd been unable to walk, and her chest x-ray revealed hardly any healthy lung tissue at all. She was 5 feet 3 inches tall, and when she arrived at Lakka, she'd weighed less than 70 pounds. Marie told me that she dreamed night and day of eating as she recovered her health, that she thought of making mud soup and eating sticks. She thought about how crunchy they would be, imagining them as overstuffed with rich, soft nutrients inside. She could not think of anything but food all the time. Almost apologetically, a nurse sitting beside us said, "We feed everyone 3 times a day, big meals, but it's not enough." Not nearly enough, in fact, but the nurse explained that even 3 meals a day strained resources because food was not considered to be an essential aspect of tuberculosis treatment, and so there was no funding for food. Some people became so hungry, she told me, that they left the hospital and stopped taking their medication, which increased the likelihood that the TB bacteria within them would continue multiplying, eventually developing resistance to first-line treatment. But they simply could not live with the hunger. In Henry's short, beautifully written memoir, he referenced hunger many times. He called Lakka a place where hope and despair intertwined. I found myself in a world where food was scarce, water was rationed, and clothing was inadequate for the chilly nights. After I first met Henry, I asked one of the nurses if he would be okay. "Oh, we love our Henry," she said. She told me he had already gone through so much in his young life. "Thank God," she said, "that Henry was so loved by his mother Isatu, who visited him regularly and brought him extra food whenever she could." Most of the patients at Lakka had no visitors. Many had been abandoned by their families. A tuberculosis case in the family was a tremendous mark of shame. But Henry had Isatu. I realized none of this was an answer to whether he would be okay. "He's such a happy child," she told me. "He cheers everyone up. When he'd been able to go to school, the other kids called him pastor because he was always offering them prayers and assistance." Still, That wasn't an answer. We will fight for him, she told me at last. All right. I think that was pretty clean. I think that was pretty clean. All right. That's chapter 1. And then it goes from there. It goes on and on. It gets longer. But it's a short book. It's not too long. Oh, a few nerd fighters just watched Harvey together, Gustavo. That's lovely to hear. Nobody ever brings anything small into a bar. In this world, Elwood, you must be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. Love that book. All right. I'm going to go get back to work and mix my day between signing and copy editing. But thank you for being here with me and being with each other. Will I narrate the audiobook? Yes, I am narrating the audiobook. There is an audiobook. You can pre-order it wherever you pre-order audiobooks, and I am narrating the audiobook. I thought it was important for me to narrate because it's very much written from my perspective. Like, it's a history of tuberculosis, but it's very much grounded in like me, you know? And so I think it'd be weird if somebody else narrated it and was like, then I went to Sierra Leone and then I talked to this expert in tuberculosis. Vibes would be off. So yeah, I'm excited about the audiobook. I also just love audiobooks. I think it's such a wonderful way to read and makes reading so much more accessible to lots of people. And so, yeah, you can definitely get the audiobook wherever audiobooks are pre-orderable, and it will come out the day that the book comes out, March 18th, 2025. Poor Jenny says, finally made a stream only to find out that the stream is ending, Jenny. Can I vlog the narrating? I'm so curious how that happens. Yeah, I mean, maybe I can. So lots of people make their audiobooks at home in like home studios, or record them on like I could theoretically record it on the mic I use to record Dear Hank and John, but I like going into a studio. We have a great studio here in Indianapolis called Earshot Audio. And I like going into the studio because I get to work with a producer who's like, you know, just a really nice guy, and I've worked with him on a bunch of different projects before, and I feel like I can trust him to tell me when I'm either mispronouncing something or just like starting to like get it droney or whatever, and not just starting to sound like it's read instead of like it's performed. And I don't know. I just find it helpful to have a producer. So I'm excited to go in, and it'll probably be like a 2 or 3 day recording session. But it won't. It'll be fun. So yeah, I'll try to vlog it. That's a good idea. Yeah, but it's really just drinking water and reading out loud. There's not much to it. Snazzy Cat says, thanks, Henry, for sharing with John. Yeah, I'm so grateful. I mean, this book only exists because of Henry's generosity and openness and willingness to, you know, share really difficult, vulnerable parts of his life with a broad audience. And I think that requires a lot of guts. And I'm very grateful to him for being so open about it and reading the book and caring about the book and all that stuff. So, yeah. All right. It's good to be with y'all. I'm gonna go continue to copy edit. Thanks for being here, DFTBA.